Hey, it's Ronsley from mustamplify.com. We are the first audio marketing agency in the world, and you're listening to 360 Entrepreneur with Jan Ilunga.
This is episode 214, Amplify, how to intensify your content reach. Here we go.
Welcome to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast, the show for entrepreneurs and small business owners who dream big and want to do bigger. Join some of the world's top entrepreneurs, internet marketers, and best-selling authors as they share their inspiring stories, their struggles, and give actionable tips that will help you build, grow, and promote your online business. Here's your host, Yanni Lunga.
Hey, welcome to a brand new episode, the first for the month of June, and we kick off things in a great way. The topic of today is something that is useful for you if you create content. We're gonna cover some things you can do to intensify the reach of your content, and there is a specific framework called Amplify that you can follow, and we address that from the podcaster's perspective. So if you create audio content, you're in the right place, but you're also in the right place if you create video content, because as you'll hear, most of the advice today's guest expert, Ronsley Vaz, has to share when it comes to the Amplify framework applies to visual content as well. I want to dive right into it because Ronsley has so many great tips for everybody here. The show notes for today's episode are over at yanilunga.com/episode 214. And that's it. Let's get started. Here's the interview with Ronsley Vaz from wearepodcast.com. Today, we are joined by somebody who I've been connected to for quite some time, and he's doing a lot, and I mean a lot, for the podcasting community. He's an entrepreneur who connects people and ideas in new, innovative ways, and who has been recently nominated one of Brisbane's top entrepreneurs. He's the founder of the first audio marketing agency called Amplify and Australia's leading podcasting conference, We Are Podcast, as well as a podcaster. He's the host of a couple of shows, Should I Start a Podcast? And Australia's #1 food podcast, The Bon Appetit, uniting peak performers over food. As if this wasn't enough, he's also an author. His first book is called Amplify, Rise Your Voice, Boost Your Brand, and Grow Your Business. I'm so pumped to welcome on the show Ronsley Vaz. Ronsley, how's it going?
Dude, I am fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show. It's really weird to listen to these things that you've done before, but thanks for the great introduction, man.
Well, you're welcome. And that's all you and your team. I simply limited myself on reading some of the things you have done. And I mean, I said it, you are doing so much for the podcasting community, with your podcast, with We Are Podcast, and now with the book. And you've been, as I said, you've been nominated one of Brisbane's top entrepreneurs, which is fantastic. And I think the first question I have to ask you, is there is somebody here with you and I, Ronsley, who isn't familiar with your work, could you take a moment to share how you kind of stumbled upon the podcasting world and how you have really embraced that?
Oh, that's I don't know whether it's a moment that I can take, but that's massive. So I want to rewind back to the start of 2014, where I suppose in 2013, what happened was the big failure in my entrepreneurial career, where I was a chef. I had my own restaurant, and we did service on a Saturday, and on Sunday the locks were changed, and I pretty much had no business, kind of in a matter of seconds. So I had to rebuild from there, and I decided that I was going to go down the path of exploring why people were eating the way they were eating and what the issues with food was, and how peak performers had sorted out their food, and they sorted out a lot of their other issues, and that's why they were performing well. So I started a chefing company, which is like the Uber for chefing in Australia. And we had a bunch of chefs that would go into people's homes who kind of wanted to eat right, and would cook for them once a week, have all their meals in the fridge and freezer, and would put in their Google Calendar what needed to be had and at what time and what needed to be removed from the freezer and how it had to be done. It was all sort of on autopilot. And yeah, I was friends with Michael O'Neill from Solopreneur Hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, dude, you got to start a podcast. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what I have to say. And I think that planted the seed. One thing led to the other. I bought myself a microphone and, one of them small mixers, the Behringer ones, and, plugged it into my computer. It did not work. and then it took me about 2 weeks of trying to figure out, why it did not work.
Mm-hmm.
And I took all the equipment back to the shop, and I'm like, this is just not working. I don't understand. And the guy just looks back at the mixing desk and presses a button, and everything works again. And for the life of me, I don't know what that button does. I don't know why it was pressed. And it's just, it goes to show that there are issues with everything. It doesn't matter how technically inclined you are. There's stuff to deal with. But I started the Bond Appetite podcast. That got plastered on the front page of iTunes on the banner section between Triple J and ABC Radio for I think over 5 months, which basically took it, got the most amount of listeners I think in that stint. I don't know how that happened. I don't know where iTunes got my image or where they got that image from, but that happened. And then I suppose strength to strength from that point. A bunch of people asked me how to do a podcast, and and then I created a training program around that. And then towards the middle of 2015, I went, wait a minute, there's no conference in Australia around podcasting, so I created that. And then Amplify happened the next year, and I don't know. Here we are, man. It's a massive story. So, yeah, it's a cool journey.
Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time for sharing your story with us. And what I really like about it is that you stressed the fact that you didn't know you didn't know much about podcasts, but you just got started. When you had issues with the equipment, you didn't just, give up. You basically looked for help. In this case, you went to a store. And I think that's something that it's so important. I remember I was in a similar situation than yours, Ronsley. Not when I started my podcast, but when I changed setup. So when I also use a Behringer mixer, maybe the one you're using, the Xenix 802. Yeah. And when I got that, all the things there are to turn and stuff, I was like, man, I have no idea how this works, because I had used a USB microphone before. So similarly to what you have done, luckily it didn't take me 2 weeks, but I also had to spend maybe an afternoon just trying to record different times, moving the nozzles around until I found the sweet spot. So it is a journey, and there's going to be bumps along the path, but that's part of a journey. And something I want to ask you, Ronsley, is I said that you host a show called Should I Start a Podcast? And I wanted to ask you, since you talk with so many different entrepreneurs, marketers, and podcasters more specifically, if you were to look back at the interviews you've done at the top of your head, what would you say are some of the traits podcasters have in common? Is there something that comes to mind, some of the things you see people like you and I, podcasters, share when it comes to traits, values, anything?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is the one that you mentioned earlier, where you're always learning, I suppose. Right. You never you never kind of give up. There's always something else to learn. There's always something new to do, and every time. So this is really interesting. Every single person I've interviewed who's got a successful show and got a successful business, they always know how much they don't know. And every time they learn something new, they realize how much more they have to learn. And it's the curiosity is kind of through the roof. And I think that's probably something that's huge. Their resilience is massive. They always usually have a high resilience. They can you can pretty much take them to a torture chamber and then they'll probably not give you anything because they just can deal with, a whole bunch of, I don't know, I suppose you call it stress, but anxiety and disappointment and all that kind of stuff comes with the entrepreneurial journey. And I think the third thing is that they realize that an entrepreneurial journey is a journey. It's not a destination.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's pretty much what I found as the highest values that of the people that I enjoy chatting with and who have really successful stuff.
Man, I love it. And yeah, I think you're so right. And you talked about the fact that, people know what they don't know and they aren't afraid to share it publicly, to say, I don't know. Cool. I just found out about something. I have something new to learn. And I think that for podcasters, sometimes, at least personally, I think it's somehow counterintuitive because one would think that when you start your journey, you are aware that, okay, there is so much I don't know. But somehow I feel that, especially when it comes to podcasting, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Ronsley, many new podcasters focus on perfection so much and they focus on not making any mistakes, whereas people who have been podcasting for some time, even when mistakes occur, they don't make a big deal about them because, as you said, they know that are part of the journey, right?
Well, I think there is it's a really interesting line between prolific and perfect.
Right.
I think based on your current information, you got to be as perfect as possible, but as in you got to do the best you can. We try to get away with things, but I think that having a high standard is really important.
Absolutely.
But also in the same light, sometimes you get to a point where you know so much, and the only way to learn more is to actually do. So you don't get stuck in this whole learning phase, and you get stuck in the learning phase, and it's all about information. So it's more about doing to understand or learning more. So I think there's a line that needs to be balanced, especially in business and especially as an entrepreneur, to figure out exactly how much. So self-awareness is an important thing, to know exactly how much information is enough information before implementation becomes a necessity.
Amen to that. And you just said implementation, and you implemented something relatively recently because you are now an author too. So you have your book out, Amplify, Raise Your Voice, Boost Your Brand, and Grow Your Business. The first question related to the book, Ronsley, is how did you decide to write a book? Because it's one thing to create content in the form of a podcast, videos, or articles, but it's another thing to really go throughout the entire process from A to Z and actually plan, write, and publish a book.
Well, it's a
tough one.
I think that I've been wanting to write a book for ages, and I actually did write a book for peak performers and how to eat well. And the manuscript went to the editors. It came back. We have a manuscript, but I don't know. I just didn't release it for whatever reason. And it's really funny because coming into the time when I decided to write the Amplify book, it's almost like I had so much to say that I pretty much wrote bulk of it in a week.
Wow.
And I kind of prepared. I prepared before that week. So I prepared in the sense that I knew who I wanted to write the book for, and I knew what I wanted to say. I mapped it out in Trello. I had all these lists, each by chapter, and broke the main points down into sub points. And then I booked a very expensive place in the Blue Mountains for a week. So I knew that I had to get, extremely productive while I was there, because I was paying so much money per day that I just had to put my head down and just get it done. So I wrote bulk of my book then, and I still did not finish it because towards the end of that week, I just could not get stuff done. It was extremely hard. But in the next 2 weeks, I wrote the next remaining 4 chapters and sent it to the editor. She came back about a couple of weeks later and said, these 2 places are where you got to add some more content. I sent away 74,000 words, and she sent back 41,000 words and said, you don't need all those remaining words. There's just too much. And it was a pretty quick turnaround because, again, we had a business, which means I had money to put towards this. I was not doing the editing myself. I was not doing a lot of the stuff myself. I was actually getting people who were really good at what they did to help me out through the process. So all I did was do a brain dump of my ideas, and everything from that point sort of got taken care of, and started writing in beginning of July, and August 4th is when I had a printed book in my hand.
And how, it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but how did it feel?
I actually felt, I didn't feel, I felt, I don't actually, it's really interesting. I don't really consider, I don't know. I felt normal. I felt normal when I got the book in my hand. I didn't feel great, but I did feel absolutely fantastic when I gave in my manuscript for the last time, knowing that I had no more work to do and I had everything that I had to say.
Right.
That was more significant for me than actually getting the book in my hand. When I got the book in my hand, all I was thinking about was, how can I make a bigger impact with this book?
Right.
And that's what we've been working towards over the last 4 months, has been how can each book open up a new conversation that is way bigger than ourselves, and we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, interesting to hear your journey to becoming an author. And again, you said it, that there were bumps along the way, like getting stuck somehow, not feeling like writing the last few chapters, but then you managed, and now Amplify is here. And like in every episode, if you're here with Ronsley and I, and you've been here with me before, then you know what I'm about to say. And that is that the links to everything we're talking about, including the link to Amplify the book, is going to be found in the show notes. And you mentioned, Ronsley, as you were telling us about the book and your journey, you talked about conversation. So how can the book become a tool that starts a conversation, that expands a conversation? And in the book, I know that you have a 7-step framework to leverage the power of conversation to accelerate business growth. Now, it goes without saying that this point alone, the framework, could be an entire episode's worth of an answer. But could you take a couple of minutes to give everybody a quick overview of the framework? What are the 7 steps?
Yeah, sure. So the reason for the book mainly is because we were having all these podcasters out there that were creating podcasts for podcast's sake, and they were having all these conversations about, I don't have the numbers. How do I get the numbers? Should I get all these really important guests on the show and they will share my episode? That's how I'll get the numbers. And all those are really stupid ideas, because your only job as a host is to get a story out of your guest.
Right.
That's the only job you have. You don't have any other job. And if you want to make your job easier by getting an important guest onto your show, then by all means do that, but acknowledge the fact that, you are making it easy for yourself. And also the other aspect to that is you need to have a business or some sustainable way to make sure that your podcast is creating value out there.
Right.
And it's not only about sponsors, and it's not only about numbers. So the reason for the 7-step framework is because I was going into businesses to say, you had to start a podcast, and they would not listen to me. They didn't know what it meant. They didn't know why I was there. They didn't even understand what I was trying to say. So when I flipped that around and said, do you know how every single conversion that has ever happened in your business, whether it's getting a new team member on board, a new stakeholder, a new client, a new partner, they all happen in conversations. How about you harness the power of those conversations? And that's what we do at Amplify. And that's when they understood. And that's when they said, oh, so I should start a podcast. So rather than me say, you start a podcast, it's actually getting them to the realization that audio is such a massive tool or medium rather, that no other form of media can replicate because of the engagement that you get through it. So the 7-step framework is basically how a business can implement audio in a way that gets them attention, engagement, and sales. And to highlight the 7 steps, I suppose, A.M.P.L.I.F.Y break down into 7 steps. A is analyze your audience. If you don't know who you're going after, you don't know why you're different, and if you don't know who to partner with, then that's a big problem. That becomes your audience. Those are the 3 things you got to take care of. M is mold your brand. If you have to put your logo on everything for someone to realize that it's something from you, then there's a problem. You need to have consistent branding, and branding is not only about a logo. It's about how your images appear. It's how you pick up the phone. It's how you introduce the show. It is about a whole bunch of different things. It's about consistency, more importantly. So that's about branding. That's step 2. Step 3 is about productizing an ecosystem. Now, this is probably something that I'm not sure how many people know about, but it's about creating multiple products in your system. It's about not saying, I have this one product, please buy from me. It's about saying, I have this range of products to solve your problem. Do you have a headache? Do you have a migraine? Does your whole family get headaches? How can I help you? And I have this range of products that will be able to help you, from a natural remedy right up to high end, I suppose, medication that solves a headache. So the idea is that you create a product ecosystem in the sense that everything you do is a product. Right now, your podcast that I'm on, that's a product. Right. Because you're giving away free information. Hopefully it leads into something else, and you have to create this whole product ecosystem that makes your life as a business owner easier. We can get into that in more detail if you like, but I'll move along. L is for launch your audio. That explains itself. It's basically how to go out and create the audio. So that's only one small step in the whole framework. Right. I is how to take that piece of audio. It's called Intensify your message. How to take that piece of audio and create collateral that you can use to amplify your message. So we can take any piece of audio and create between 72 and 110 unique pieces of content from any piece of audio. And that's what I does. F is foster engagement. So basically make sure that all this content you've created and all these unique pieces of content take the person that is coming in contact with the message back to your piece of audio, so that they listen for longer periods of time, which means they're associated with your brand for longer. It's fostering engagement, which is F. And Y is probably the most important of them all. It's called yield on investment, and it's basically return on investment. And as a marketing exercise, if you're not measuring return on investment, then there's a problem. So it's about making sure that the metrics line up and what you're doing brings you money through the door. So this is like a 7-step framework for a business that wants to create a podcast. And that's what Amplify stands for.
Wow. Ronsley, I didn't realize that the word amplify was an anagram for the 7-step framework. It is incredible. And If this interview were video, you should have seen my face. I was really, I was listening to you with my mouth open like a kid at Disneyland or something, and I love it. And what I really like is the overall. So you gave us an overview of the framework, and I really like how every single step or every single letter or concept is really connected in a logical way, and the concept or step that follows is the natural next step. And you mentioned a couple of interesting things that as I was listening to you, I made a couple of notes here because, I have to ask you about those. The first one is the P in the Amplify framework. So you talked about like creating a productized ecosystem. So what would you say are some of the things people should think about when it comes to creating their ecosystem? What are some of the things to consider or to create already?
Yeah, brilliant question, because I thought I didn't explain that as well as I should have. So productizing ecosystem, now there's different people that your business comes across. Now, when you go to a networking event, you meet these people all the time where they come to you and say, hey, I am a specialist in LinkedIn. I think, you should buy from me. Right. And that they, that's all dodgy. And the problem is that they actually trying to sell to someone who is only member of the public. They don't know them. They have no way to trust them. So they're not a prospect. The problem is that we try to sell our main product, our main service to someone who's not a prospect yet. So let me explain who the kinds of people are in your ecosystem. So you have general members of the public, which you should not really care about as much because they're just everyone. Right. Then the next step is a bunch of people who know you. So they've come across something, maybe it's a social media post, maybe an article, or maybe they've seen you on stage, or a variety of different ways, but they know of you. So that's the first step. If you find a way to solve a headache for them, they become what I call a listener. So they become a listener in the sense that they kind of want to know more because you've solved a little problem for them that is quick and it's solved, and they're like, okay, I like this person, so let me find out more, and they start listening. So when I say listening, they could either watch some of your videos, or they could listen to a podcast, or they could read your blog or read your book or whatever. However, they listen for engaged periods of time. Now, in those forms of content, when you put that out to a listener, you need to find a way to help them overcome an obstacle. So in whatever you put out, if you find a way for them to overcome an obstacle, then they become a prospect. And in that, when they're a prospect, you have their attention, their engagement, and their trust. And at that stage is when you say, all right, I know that you've had this headache. We've helped you solve it. You have these obstacles. We've helped you solve it. And I know what you aspire to do. So you find what their aspirations are, and you sell them your core product based on the aspiration. And that aspiration is when they go, yes, I believe you because you've helped me with my headache. You've helped me with my obstacle. And now this aspiration, I really need this, and I've wanted this for so long. Here's my money. Let me buy from you. And all these different areas have smaller products too. You have a product to help someone with a headache. You have a product to help someone with an obstacle, and you have obviously a product to sell when you're helping them aspire to become something. And then the next level is that once they're a customer, you take it to a new level is when you find a way to get their desires sorted. And if you find a way to get the desires sorted, then they become a fan and they will keep buying from you. And that's probably the best time to create a membership. The problem today is that everyone, because it's a new thing, everyone wants to start a membership program. But I feel like the best time to create a membership is once you have a bunch of customers, the next step is to create fans. And the best way to keep fans is to make sure that desires are being met through this membership. So that's the product ecosystem, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes better sense than the first time around.
No, well, it absolutely does. Thank you so much. And I think you really made it clear that if there is somebody here with you and I who was thinking about people as other customers or people who aren't customers, then what you just shared with us makes understand the journey that there is or that is involved with people. So it's not just about people know us, they don't know us, they buy from us or they don't buy from us. As you highlighted very well, Ronsley, there are different steps. And then the last part of your comment, you mentioned membership sites. And yeah, I think you're right. And personally, I believe that the key to a membership site is to really be around and show up.
Yeah.
Like people, I think that some people, as you said, because it's something trendy, they think that, well, I'm just going to start a membership site so that I can make recurring revenue. And that isn't really a lot of work. It actually is an extremely amount of work, I can say, as somebody who has a membership site. But it's something that, I love being there for my community, and people appreciate that. So it's something that, it's nice that you put that in your answer, because as time goes on, more and more people just launch a membership site just for the launch or having one, similarly to what happens with podcasts.
Yes.
And speaking of podcasts, the I for the Amplify framework stands for, as you said, intensify your audio. And I love the fact that you, Ronsley, talked about being strategic. So it's not about publishing an episode and that's it, hoping that the famous guest is gonna share it on social media. But you said if we are strategic with that content, we can come up with many different ways to then amplify, expand the reach of our message. So could you share some of the things people can do to use the audio content they have created to draw more people into the conversation?
Absolutely. So I've actually written a post on that on the Amplify site. So it is in greater detail on the site.
Great. I'll link to that.
Yeah, just to give you an idea, there's you can take any piece of audio and put it across, in my opinion, 4 different types of platforms. Social platforms, which obviously it explains itself. Written word platforms, which is basically blogs, articles, and which is probably the original form of content marketing, and you can do it in a variety of different ways. 3 is video platforms, and everyone talks about how video is going to explode, and that's important. And then finally, relationship platforms. So make sure that you're building relationships with your audio. So those are the 4 different types of platforms. Just to give you an idea, you can take any piece of audio and ask someone or get an assistant to help and say to them, can you go through, listen to this piece of audio and write 10 of the top takeaways that you got from this audio. And those 10 takeaways can become 10 tweets. It can become 10 Instagram images.
Right.
It can become a whole bunch of different things. And then you can take that another step further and say, remove 3 quotes from this piece of audio, and then they become Instagram, Pinterest, and everything else. You can also, what we do is we have writers all over the world who receive a piece of audio and they write like a Huffington Post 1,000-word article based on that audio. So not only is it a set of show notes, it's not a set of show notes, actually, it's more of a proper article,
right,
based on the takeaways and the ideas and the conversation and everything put together. And that can be put on, obviously, Medium and LinkedIn and all these other places. So there's all these different things that can be done. And then finally, you can probably take, the takeaways and the resources and the quotes and put them all into a slide deck and share that on SlideShare. So there's all these different things that can be done, but people don't really do. Yeah, those are like some examples of what you can do to intensify your message.
Great. Thank you, Ronsley. Again, I said a moment ago that I love this point, and your answer was fantastic. And what I really like about it is that you touched upon something that many people don't think about when it comes to this, when it comes to amplify one's message, expand the reach of one's message. People think, well, yeah, I've just created the content. Now I have to work on the marketing. But as you said, most of the things we can do to repurpose our audio content are things that is not that it takes us 5 days to do. For example, if you edit your podcast by yourself, then you're actually listening to the interview, or the audio content. So instead of just focusing on polishing the audio, whenever you come across an interesting point, you can strip that, mark that, timestamp that, so that then when you want to do some of the things Ronsley shared here with us, it's going to be very easy. Okay, it was at minute 2 and 10 seconds, there was this thing. And you said it can be different types of content. So it can be articles for publication. So that's a great way to also build authority if we use the content of our podcast to then be featured on places like the Huffington Post. It could be blogging platforms like Medium and LinkedIn that are accessible to everybody, relatively easy to use. It could be video, it could be slide decks. And there are 2 resources I want to share here that I think fit perfectly into the conversation we're having, Ronsley. One is a tool called Wave. I'm not sure. Have you heard of Wave, Ronsley?
No, I haven't. What does it do?
Okay, so you're gonna love this one. So it's spelled WAVVE, and the site is wave.video. And basically it allows you to create, they call them animated social media cards. So in other words, on the platform, you upload an image. I, for example, upload the artwork of my podcast, and then you can either record or upload a piece of audio.
Okay.
So let's say from this interview, for example, I could take one of the 7 steps of the Amplify framework you mentioned. I could take that, a few seconds of that, upload it to the platform, and then it creates an animated image that basically when I share on, let's say, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, a person is going to see the podcast artwork if I use that as an image. And as you talk, Ronsley, there's going to be like a volume wave that goes up and down.
Right.
Yeah. It's something that really stands out. So the site is Wave, so WAVVE.video, and they have different plans, including a free one. And that's definitely something to check out. And again, it's great because it allows people to listen to an appetizer, to a golden nugget, to a quote on different platforms. So that's the first one. And the second one is Anchor. Have you heard of Anchor before, Ronsley? Is an app?
No, dude, no.
Oh, this one is amazing for audio content creators. And they've recently, so the app has been around for maybe a year or so, but they recently updated the app and basically they've changed everything. The concept is different, the layout, the features, and basically Wave allows you to create audio content with the app, and you can record yourself, you can add, they have a library of audio clips you can use, they have some sounds you can add music from your phone, and you can even have people leave you audio messages that then you add to your creation. So with Anchor, the audio, let's call it audio story you create is called Station, and you can be really creative with this. I've seen there is one profile called Podcast of the Day, and they're doing an incredible thing because the idea is basically the Instagram stories or Snapchat concept for audio content creators.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's amazing. You can create chapters. So let's say, for example, about this episode, I could create 8 chapters. One would be the intro where I say, in this station, I'm gonna share the 7-step Amplify framework. And then I would interrupt my recording. And then I would say the first letter A stands for blah, blah, blah. And then, you can be really creative. You can do all in one take. Or what I like to do is I add audio snippets in between, some funny sounds and things like that, so that there is kind of a mini break. So for us, Ronsley, audio content creators, implementing the things you have mentioned with us and think about something like Anchor could be a very good way to expand our reach. So I thought, I just thought I would mention those two resources because I think they fit perfectly into the conversation we're having here.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for that. That's I've never heard of either one of those. That's cool.
Man, you're gonna love them, especially Anchor. And the site for Anchor, so is an app, but you can download it. They have both the iOS and Android version. The site is anchor.fm. So that's the site. And I believe that you can even upload audio content from your desktop. That's something I haven't played around with yet, but I believe that's a feature as well. So that is for intensifying the reach of your audio content. And another thing that I have to ask about, Ronsley, when it comes to the Amplify framework is the letter F.
Yep.
So you talked about the importance of fostering engagement. So it's not just about having a one-way communication or a monologue, but it's about really fostering engagement, interacting with people. And I know that you have the Facebook group that we are podcast community that is really interactive, engaged. So I wanted to see if you have something more to add when it comes to foster engagement, some things podcasters can do, maybe start a Facebook group or anything like that to foster engagement.
Sure. Well, one of the first things, or one of the most important things every podcaster should do is issue calls to action.
Right.
They somehow forget that there's something that needs to be done. And it doesn't have to be buy my stuff. It can be very simply like, what's the next in your product ecosystem? How do you take someone, like maybe you have a product that solves someone's obstacles. Mm-hmm. So they're listening to your podcast and they're going, yeah, this podcast helps me with my headaches. Okay, that's great. What's the next step? And if you don't make sure to mention that, if you guys have solved your headaches, here is something you can go and download or get or buy to remove your obstacles, then how are they supposed to know? So issue calls to action is a great way to foster engagement, encouraging dialogue, making sure that they say something back to you in some form. This is a sort of a thankless process where, it's just one-sided. And, this guy, the ask method, have you heard of that guy? What's his name?
Yeah, Ryan Levesque.
Yeah, Ryan Levesque has written a great book on quizzes. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that you can do to foster engagement. There's so many different things that you can do to foster engagement. I mean, Facebook groups, I suppose, it's cool. But take it one step further. Be more interactive with your listener. Like find a way to create something that is actually beneficial to them, not just beneficial to you, I suppose. So that's my 2 cents on engagement.
Love it. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I think Facebook groups are great in the sense that they are easy to create and people pretty much know how Facebook works, but then it's important to have people in our own ecosystem. So you mentioned, if we manage to then get them on our email list or something like that, is easier for us to communicate. And it's great that you mentioned quizzes. And actually, quizzes is something we talked about in the past in the episode with Randy Reyes from Outgrow. And we talked about quizzes and how quizzes can be fun, but can also be used to foster engagement, as you said, Ronsley, to attract new people toward our message, as well as grow our email list. So I'll make sure to add the link to that as well. And Ronsley, this has been a great conversation. I've had so much fun. I think that one can tell. And in the show notes, as I said, I'll link to everything we've talked about. Yep. And I want to ask you, I know that you are on Twitter at Ronsley, you're on Instagram at Ronsley Vaz. If somebody would like to connect with you, give you a shout out, or maybe ask you a question, what would you say is the fastest way to do that?
Well, add me on Facebook, I suppose. Facebook.com/Ronsley. I'm most, I think, on Facebook. Okay. But also, I want to just add something before we wind up. I found a way to amplify the conversation about something more than just the book. And each book that is bought keeps a girl in school that has been saved from sex trafficking in Cambodia.
Nice.
For a week. So not only, the idea here is that we can do way more than we think we can. And there are issues that I suppose as entrepreneurs we should be solving. So I suppose the point here is that when you think about your next entrepreneurial venture, I'm talking to the audience, think about how you can make a bigger difference, because that would be super cool. But yeah, Facebook is probably the best place.
Great. Thank you, Ronsley, for mentioning Facebook, and more importantly, for what you just shared and for what you do. And yeah, I think it's great that if we manage, or if we're able to add something that has a bigger impact and a bigger purpose, and that is actually life-changing to somebody, like in your case with the book, then it's something we should definitely do. And to wrap up, Ronsley, I want to ask you about your conference. So you said, in addition to all the things you do, you're also the founder of Australia's leading podcasting conference, We Are Podcast. And this year's edition for 2017 is held in the Gold Coast, November 2nd to 4th. And the main focus or the theme is Convince, Convert, and Automate. And I see the lineup includes some of the past guests of the show, like John Lee Dumas and Kate Erickson from Entrepreneur on Fire. There is Omar Zenhom, who was the very first guest here on the show. And you have a bunch of other experts. You have Clarissa Rayward, Andrew Griffiths. And actually, Ronsley, we are doing something special because we are making this official. So the list of speakers also includes me. And I'm really, really honored, Ronsley, that you asked me to come all the way to Australia to speak at We Are Podcast. So I think the final question I have to ask you, Ronsley, is for everybody who's here with you and I, if you can take a moment to tell everybody a little bit more about the conference, We Are Podcast. And obviously we are months away from the event, but what are you guys cooking? What can people expect from it?
Well, last year, probably one of the best compliments we got for the conference was from a speaker that has been on the circuit for about 20 years, and he said that We Are Podcast was the warmest conference he had ever been to.
Nice.
And he loved the energy in the room. He loved the people that were there. And the thing that we're cooking up, I suppose, is not only John and Kate are coming, Jordan Harbinger is coming back.
Nice.
Obviously, you're coming all the way from the other side of the planet. Omar Zenhom and Nicole are coming back, and I think our lineup just keeps getting like insane. I would have given anything to spend time with these people a while ago, but it's a very intimate conference. We are looking to expand. We're probably going to do it. We're looking to maybe do it in Brisbane this year, which is not far from the Gold Coast. It's about 40 minutes away, so it's not too much of a difference. But everything that we're going to do this year is around convince, convert, and automate. So if you think that you have a problem with conversion, then this is probably a good conference to attend. Automation, this is a good conference to attend. And I think we forget when we were talking earlier about the Amplify framework in podcast, we forget how to convince.
Right.
And that's something we're gonna tackle this year as well. So yeah, 3 days of absolute fun for everyone, absolute drain for me. But then I get a chance to recuperate at the speaker retreat, which I think is going to be epic this year with the kind of people. So yeah, that's what's coming up. It's going to be cool.
Thank you. You heard it, guys. We Are Podcast 2017. So if you live in Australia, or maybe you're planning a trip right now as you're listening to Ronsley Vaz and I, then We Are Podcast 2017 is definitely a conference you should look at. And you're going to find the link once again to that and everything else Ronsley and I have talked about in this episode in the show notes. Ronsley, thank you so much for being here, sharing your story, telling us more about the Amplify framework, We Are Podcast, and overall for what you do for the podcasting community and other people with nice initiatives. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for having me.
And we are back. Pretty cool, huh? So that was the Amplify framework. And as I said at the beginning of today's episode, the focus of the framework is on audio content, but most of the steps apply to you even if you create visual content, let's say video, for example, YouTube videos or something like that. We covered quite some ground and mentioned many different things. Ask, for example, Ryan Levesque's book, Ask. If you're interested in audiobooks, you can actually get it for free. And there is the link to that and everything else Ronsley and I have covered in today's episode in the show notes page over at janilunga.com/episode 214. And there you're also going to find the link to the We Are Podcast conference. We mentioned the conference coming up in November 2nd to the 4th. Incredible lineup of speakers. And yes, I'm going to be there. So if you live in Australia or plan to be in Australia toward the beginning of November, then We Are Podcast is definitely something you'd want to write down in your calendar. And you should check out the show notes page because the ticket sales are now open. So you can head over to the show notes page again, janilunga.com/episode 214. And across the links there, you're going to find the link of the page you can use to actually get your ticket for the We Are Podcast conference in Brisbane, Australia. This is it for today. Thank you so much for joining Ronsley and I in this first episode of June. And man, oh man, June is going to be a great month. So make sure to come back next Wednesday.
Thank you for listening to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. For more tips and tools, head over to www.janilunga.com.